Kathy Cohen's Democracy Remixed and her Black Youth Project, I think, is really great. She's on the ground. She's obviously got the funding. She's got the network in place. She's getting the data, and then she's applying that to the hip hop generation, saying what's their media use, what's their political engagement, do they vote, what kind of civic organizations and associations and activist groups are they part of. This is the sort of stuff that adds the rigor. No flaky kind of assumptions and stuff. This is what we need. And when anybody says, well, what's up? You guys are just sort of writing about entertainment. It's like, actually, no. Look at this work that's done. And so Kathy Cohen's work, I think, is an indication of what we should be looking for and what I'm looking for. And then last part, more good ethnographic work. There's lots of great stuff out there. Joe Schloss's Making Beats and Foundation, Mike Jeffries' Thug Life, Sujatha Fernandez, Close to the Edge. Just people who are out there in the field and globally in Sujatha. Am I saying her name right? Sujatha? Sujatha. There it is. Yeah, it's a great book, and she's out in the field, in a global field. I can't wait to read the section on Caracas. I'll be down there soon. My wife is from Caracas. But they're out there and they're knocking heads and knocking boots and generally getting it. They're out there. They're fucking around with knowledge. And so what I want to say is that in this case this is the material we need. It's like a friend in Estonia referred to me as a closet scholar. You stay in your room and you do your work from your closet, from your office. And I won't deny that in my case. I do too much of that. But these other folks are out there in the hood, in the streets, and they are doing interviews and encountering people. That work we can use. That work we need. So we'll see more of that, I think, if there's a third edition.
Awesome. And so I love Murray's reference to Kathy Cohen's work, because Kathy's not a hip-hop head. And that's why it's important when you have someone like Kathy, who's a senior political scientist, progressive politics, buy into the power of hip-hop and hip-hop studies. It validates all the work that we do. Murray wants to be modest, but my Bronx braggadocio won't allow me to share Murray's modesty in that regard. I think, and he would honestly admit that when we put together the first edition, we were hoping to end the conversation. And by that, not that this would be the last book, right, in terms of what's written about hip-hop, or the last even edited volume, but that there would be no more response to this isn't real, right? This is not scholarly. This is not rigorous. That, we were going to try to raise the bar as high as possible as it could have been raised in 2004 and then 2011. And the fact that we do hear from folks all the time that, this is what got me to graduate school, right? When my committee didn't think that there was any work out there, right? That I could hand them this 600-page, volume, and they'd be like, oh, wow, I've never heard of this before, right? And so that was important work. And I think, I want to give a lot of credit to our editor on the first project, and then for a little part of the second project, Matt Burney. Matt Burney brought Murray and I together in a very interesting kind of circle of events. And so I take you back to 1999, and Murray had actually written a review about one of our colleagues' books. Yeah, right. And so, my first book had just come out, and I was really sensitive about all this kind of stuff. And in a review that was not a review of my book, Murray kind of mentioned my book in passing, right? And I was a little salty about it, right? So I sent Murray this email, right? Didn't know Murray from jump, right? Expressing my saltiness, right?
In one word.
And so Murray played it cool, right? For like a year, right? He responded to me a year later. He's like, there was some stuff going on, and yeah, maybe I didn't pay enough attention, right? By that time, it was squashed in my mind because, I was still at that time dealing with those early energies with my first book. Lo and behold, almost 6 months later, I get this email from Matt Burney, who then was an editor at Wesleyan, and he asked me to read Murray's manuscript for his first book, right? It's like, okay, this is kind of an interesting change of events, right? And of course, small field, right? And of course, not knowing what I think about this cat yet, right? Because my only contact with him has been through an email. And of course, then I read his first book, and it's like, oh my God, this is some incredible stuff. And Matt then moves on to Routledge, right? And we recognize what Routledge was at the time, right? And as much as we can kind of bash Routledge now, at the time that we were looking at that subjoint, if you go back to the early days, particularly when Bill Germano was the editorial leadership at Routledge, they were doing cutting-edge work in cultural studies, right? I mean, in fact, here in the United States, they pretty much defined the field in terms of scholarly publication. So if you were going to do a book of this nature, right, and they have had successful, these kind of edited volumes that were definitive volumes in all of the subgenres and subfields, that if we were going to do this book, it had to be with Routledge. And Matt intuitively understood the value of the project and why it was important to have folks like Murray and I work on it together. So Murray's coming from communication studies, much more of a social science focus. I'm a humanities guy, American studies, English, African American studies. And I think there was a great tension when we pulled the project together that allowed us to get a really quality interdisciplinary experience in terms of what was being read. There are a bunch of folks that I had never read before that Murray was able to introduce me to, and vice versa. And so that when we came around to do the second edition, we all both had such a greater frame of the amount of work that was out there. And in some ways, the second edition was a joy in the sense that we could measure both the impact of the first edition on the field by measuring all the work that was out there, right? One of the great things that Matt did before he left Routledge for Sage was to make the suggestion that we actually send it out to reviewers, right? And ask folks who are teaching the book on a regular basis, right? What are the pieces that you use all the time, right? What pieces would you like to have included now that the field has changed? And so the second volume with the 50% more pieces turnover in the pieces is a product of the book itself, I think, being a communal process, right? Collaborative in the broadest sense of the word, not just in terms of Murray and myself, but folks who are out there using the book and teaching the book and invested in hip-hop studies then had a say in what the second volume would be. And I think that speaks incredibly to what we think about hip-hop studies now in general. Ironically and unfortunately, in 2011, we're still fighting almost the same battles about what hip-hop studies is. There's no work out there, and I know this is the case with Murray, and I'm sure it is with Guthrie, and probably to a lesser extent, VJ. It's still a small group of people who get all the hip-hop manuscripts, right? That we're all being asked to write about manuscripts that are coming, to publishers. They were all still being asked to write on tenure cases and promotion cases for folks who have anything to do with hip-hop. A quick shout out to someone like Sohail Dalatse, and I've just read his incredible new manuscript that connects hip-hop and U.S.-bred black nationalism with this idea of Muslim international, right? And I'd like to think that that's the joint has actually created a space in the academy where someone like Sohail could bring this incredible contribution to the field and not have to explain why it's important and what it's in conversation with. And so I'll kind of leave my comments at that.
I love Sohail. Yeah. I've been waiting on that book forever. I'm so
we
excited
all
for
have.
it. Yeah.